The fastest way to build muscle as a skinny guy is to bulk. And you've been bulking for a few months now, but now you're wondering whether you should stop the bulk and cut or keep pushing through. This video is a complete step-by-step guide to knowing exactly when to stop your bulk and how to solve every problem you'll face along the way. Let's get into it. All right, you've been bulking up for some time. You found your maintenance calories and you've been eating in a slight calorie surplus, and over time, you've added more calories. Now you're over here. And you're contemplating, do I stop the bulk and cut down, or do I keep bulking and try to build more muscle? Now, when guys reach this point, this is typically when you're a few months into the bulk, 4, 6, 8, 10 months in, and this is a valid question. In fact, I think in a lot of cases, most guys should stop their bulks because they get so obsessed with seeing the weight on the scale go up that they don't realize that the weight that they're putting on is fat. And I hear it all the time. And honestly, I said this myself too, that I want to reach X weight. I want to be 180 pounds. I want to be 200 pounds. I want to be 220 pounds. Guys get obsessed over saying they want to be this much weight. But then if you're starting your bulk at 150 pounds, let's just say, and you say, I want to be 180 pounds by the end of this. Over the course of your bulk, you very well may get there. You might gain 30 pounds and be 180 at the end. But what is that weight consisting of? Are we gaining 30 pounds of muscle? Likely not. It's going to be some muscle, some fat, and some water. But the higher this number is, the further it is away from your original starting point, the more fat you're going to gain if your goal is to get to this weight. And so I say to those people, if you're obsessing over the weight on the scale, I would obsess over how you look instead. I wouldn't use your body weight as a measure of how successful your bulk was, because there's 500, there's 600 pound people that exist in the world, but they're not in shape. They're just fat and obese. And so we do not want to become like those people. We want to get big, but we also want to stay moderately lean in the process, I'm guessing. And so currently you're right here. You're a few months into the bulk and you're wondering, should I stop or should I keep going? This video is going to cover every single base, all the questions you need to ask yourself to be 100% certain whether you should stop the bulk and cut down or keep pushing through. But I'm going to say right now, stopping the bulk and going on a cut means you're going to be eating in a calorie deficit. Going on a cut is plan Z. It is the last option that we will resort to if all else fails. And the reason I say that, even though I just said that I think cutting is really important, is that when you're entering a hard calorie deficit like this, trying to lose body fat, you are going to be in a state where you are not building any muscle whatsoever. And so for 6, 8, 10, 12, 16 weeks, you will not be building any muscle whatsoever. I want to, if your goal is to get as jacked as possible, if you know that you're going to be building the most amount of muscle in this slight calorie surplus, your plan should be to stay in this calorie surplus for as long as humanly possible before you resort to a cut. A cut is the last option. And so I'm going to cover every single base, like I said, for you to be 100% sure that you can keep pushing your bulk forward. And if not, if all else fails, then we cut down. And I'll show you what to do for that. Now, if you're watching this video and you're wondering, should I stop my bulk or should I keep going? I think the first natural question you should ask yourself is, what happens if I don't stop? What happens if I keep bulking? How is my body going to respond? I think it's pretty obvious that you're going to put more weight on the scale. That's pretty well known that if you're eating in a calorie surplus, especially if you're increasing the amount of calories you eat over time, that weight on the scale is going to go up. So this is expected. What I want to focus on is mainly the things below. Your waist is going to get bigger. When you're bulking up, this is a process. I'm going to draw a jacked guy. I'm going to try my best at least. If we were to look at a jacked guy, there we go. If you were to look at somebody who's in shape, one of the first things you'll notice, consciously or subconsciously, is that the size of their waist is really small relative to the width of their shoulders and their lats up top. And so they're really broad up here, but then they come down to a really small waist. If you were to look at a fat person, this is somebody who does not have a lot of width up top, but does have a really wide waist. And so it's kind of the opposite. We have a bigger waist and a smaller width up top. If you're bulking up, your waist is not going to get any smaller. You are putting on more size. And a great reflection of fat gain is the size of your waist. Now, some guys are born with really wide hip bones. That's not something I can control for, and your waist is going to look bigger automatically. But if your waist is progressively getting bigger week after week, month after month, and you go from a waist like this to a waist like this, and you notice some love handles kind of forming over here, that's not the end of the world, but it is a really good sign that if these love handles, if this waist is getting bigger, that you are getting fatter. The goal of a bulk, as I see it, is to speed up muscle growth and minimize fat gain. And so we want to make this process of building muscle as fast as humanly possible. Now, like I said, your waist is going to get bigger on a bulk. It's not going to get smaller. But the idea is that the muscle that we're gaining, the size that we're gaining everywhere else, is going to outpace the amount of size we're gaining on our waist. If your waist is getting drastically bigger, like bigger way faster than everything else, that is a very good sign that you're getting fat. And an easy way to tell if your waist is getting bigger, this is this guy's belly button right here, and this is his hip bones. We want to put a tape measure just in between here. And so you'll measure the size of your waist, the circumference, once a week. Now, you might not see crazy changes in your waist size every single week, but look at it on a monthly basis. Is your waist getting bigger every single month? If it is, then that's not really a bad thing. But if it's getting drastically bigger, like if you look at it, like I said at the beginning of the video, focus on how you look, not necessarily the scale weight. If your waist goes up by 0.2 inches and you don't look any different at all, your waist looks the exact same size, that's fine. But if you're looking at your waist month over month and you take off your shirt and you see that your waist it went from going down like this to now kind of shaping out like a muffin, that's a very good sign that you're getting fat. And so I'd keep a huge eye out on your waist during a bulk. I think it's actually the second most important metric to track when you're trying to get more jacked. That rhymed. Okay, the next point is that you're going to feel more sluggish. You're going to feel more lethargy. You're going to feel progressively more tired the longer you bulk. And you're going to feel more tired in every aspect of your life. But more specifically, it's going to be after you eat. That is when the tiredness wave is going to hit you. This is a symptom. It's not the main root of the problem. This is a symptom of worse digestion. Your digestion is not improving. It is getting progressively worse. If your digestion is starting to get worse the more you bulk, that is a very good sign that we need to work on your digestion. We need to improve that. This is kind of a side note, but I'm going to circle back. In life, in any goal you ever go after, the hardest thing, or one of the hardest things to navigate, are situations where you either have to push or pivot. When I say push, I mean push through the discomfort. Even when things get a little rocky, you continue to persist. Pivot would mean you're pushing through, but then you get to a point where the suffering is kind of unnecessary and you decide to turn around or find another way over the problem. In every pursuit, if you're running a business, if you work a job, if you're having an argument with somebody, if you're trying to get jacked, if you're trying to learn guitar, there is always going to be a situation where, is it worth it for me to keep pushing through, or should I try another way? And this sounds extremely simple, but it's actually very difficult to navigate this problem because you don't know what the outcome's going to be. If you're experiencing one of these issues, it's not an immediate sign that you stop the bulk. If you get worse digestion, it's not an immediate sign that you pivot. In most cases, it's actually a push. If your digestion's getting worse, if your sleep isn't as good, if you're getting weaker in the gym, if your stomach feels bloated all the time, if you find yourself eating late at night, you're constantly eating at midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. in the morning, and you have to get up early, and you're like, shoot, my sleep sucks now because I have to eat so late. It's not a sign that you immediately stop bulking. It's not a sign that you stop going to the gym. It's a problem that you're facing, yes, but it's not always a pivot. Sometimes it's a push. You have to look at, when am I eating my meals? When it is time to eat, am I eating those meals on time? What is in those meals that is making it hard for me to eat? Am I getting distracted while I eat that causes the meals to take longer? There's a bunch of different questions you can ask yourself for every single problem you'll face. What I'm saying is these things, and I wouldn't call them problems, I would say that there are results that occur if you keep bulking for longer These things are going to happen at some point. And so if you encounter one of these issues, it doesn't mean that you immediately stop the bulk and never bulk again or go on a hard cut. It could just be a slight hiccup or a small speed bump that you find in the road that you just have to get over. And so, like I said, there's going to be a push and a pivot for every situation. I'm going to show you how to push through every possible problem that you'll find. And then if all else fails, then we pivot. Pivot is the last resort. Like I said, plan Z. Now, if you don't stop bulking and you keep going, you're going to run into the things we just talked about. But there are bigger problems at play here. These are going to be the worst, the baddest, the hairiest, biggest problems that you're going to have to deal with when you're bulking. And the first one you can see up here is bad digestion. So the reason I put this at number 1 and not getting fat or other issues is because your digestion, people say your gut is like your second brain. And I do not disagree with those people. If your digestion isn't in check, you're going to have more acne, you're going to have worse sleep, you'll feel tired throughout the day, you won't be able to process the food you're eating, you'll have crappy training sessions, you'll get progressively weaker, your mood will suck, and I'm sure there's a bunch of other issues that I'm missing. But those are just a few off the top of my head. If you cannot process the food that you are eating, since you're eating in a calorie surplus, so we have the amount of calories we need to stay alive, we have our maintenance calories, you are eating in a calorie surplus. So let's just say you're right over here. If you're eating more calories than you're burning off, if you're eating more calories than this maintenance, you are going to gain weight. The body's number 1 priority is not to gain weight. It's not to gain muscle. It is to survive. And so technically, all these extra calories are not necessary for the body to live. And so your body, you're going to be at times very uncomfortable trying to eat a lot of food, especially the more food you eat over time, the more calories you're eating, the worse your digestion will get, especially if you're not changing the foods, if you're not monitoring your digestion, if you're not looking at supplements, things we'll talk about this video. Fundamentally, if your digestion is not good, if you cannot process the extra food that you're eating, your body is not going to respond well, and these are just some of the issues that you'll run into. The second biggest problem that guys face when they are trying to bulk up and get bigger is not something that happens inside of the body like digestion. It is the constraints that occur on your schedule and on your time. The tough part about making progress in any goal and any pursuit is that not only do you have to do the right things to make progress, which takes a while to learn, you also have to balance that and progress here as well as doing everything else in your life that you're already doing, or at least the things that you want to keep in your life. And so if you have work, a business, school, friends, family, nights out, these are going to be things that you care about that you also want to maintain while making progress. The tough thing here is that when you're bulking up, the time that you would spend doing these other things, some of that is going to have to go to eating, to training, to recovery, to learning about each of these things so that you can make the most progress if that's something you care about. Now, if you're watching this and saying, well, I don't care about making the max amount of progress, this probably isn't the channel for you, right? We're more concerned about doing the best we can. And so that means that if you're going to be giving time to the things that generate progress, which is eat all of your meals, train hard, get to bed on time, maybe some nights you won't be able to go out. Maybe some days you won't be able to hang out with friends. Maybe some days you'll have to miss out on things that you would otherwise do in order to do the right things to make progress. Now, this all comes down to what do you actually want? What kind of results are you actually shooting for with this? Now, I'm going to assume for this video that you care about making the most progress possible. If you're not able to manage your time to fit all this in and still do the majority of these things, then you're not going to make any results because you have to do these things that cause progress continuously for not only weeks or months, but in most cases, years. The reason why you see so few people who have the results you want is because those people were willing to stick it out and not see results for a very long time, 4 years, until they made enough progress that they were considered good at what they do. And this goes for people who make money. This goes for people who have a lot of muscle. This goes for people who have the results that you want. They didn't just acquire them. They do things for years on end without ever getting noticed. And then all of a sudden, well, not all of a sudden, but over time, more and more people recognize how good they are, and then some of them get famous or whatever. Going back to the original point, there's going to be constraints on your time. When you're trying to bulk up, it's not like a weight loss journey. If there's a fat person who wants to lose 100 pounds, all they have to do is just not eat and move. And so they save a ton of time that they normally spend eating by not eating and just moving instead. When you're trying to get bigger, it's the opposite. You now have to take up more time to eat because you have to eat more food. And so you have to make sure that those food choices are beneficial to you and your goals, which we're gonna cover in this video. I'm so huge on time constraints, and it's something that nobody talks about when trying to get big, because everyone just says, oh, you just need a calorie surplus and you need protein and lift weights. It's like, yes, that is absolutely true, but what happens in the day-to-day? What do we do to manage all this stuff while making progress everywhere else in life? Because I'm assuming your only goal in life isn't just to get jacked. You probably have financial goals, relationship goals. You want to see the world, you want to travel. There's other things that you care about. And so we have to manage our time. The third issue that guys will face, and this one's a bit unique, is that you get fat. Now I say it's a bit unique because these things are issues that you will see occur almost instantly. You don't get bad digestion over a 6-month span. It can happen tomorrow. Like, you can not be able to process the food at all the next day. The next day, you might also run into time constraints, scheduling conflicts with your work, with relationships, with social outings. These problems can happen instantly. The thing about getting fat is that you don't get fat instantly. It happens, like I said, we're in a calorie surplus. It happens from being in a calorie surplus for a very long time, mixed with bad digestion, mixed with late nights, mixed with not healthy food choices. There's a bunch of different things that go into gaining unnecessary amounts of fat. And so this happens, getting fat happens over a long time span. Now, I've already made a lean bulking video on the page before, so I'm not gonna dive too deep into that, but I'm gonna cover how to counteract all three of these and how to actually reverse them so you can have more time, so you can improve your digestion, so you can reduce the amount of unnecessary fat gain, so that we did everything we possibly could to keep the bulk going. And if all else fails and you've already been doing all these things, or you try them and they don't work for you, then we can cut. And I'm taking the time to go over each of these problems and what they mean and how they happen and how to solve them, so you can be 100% sure that you are still going to commit to your bulk, or like I said, if it's a push, you keep bulking. If it's a pivot, you choose to cut, and how to go about doing that. But the first one I'm going to solve is time constraints. Managing getting big while trying to get good at everything else, pretty much. So here's how I'm going to solve it. And I'm going to solve this from 3 different angles. What to do, how to do it, and when to push versus pivot. So I talked about this in the beginning of the video, when to push through discomfort and when to pivot and find another way or stop entirely. But let's start with what to do. I think the 2 biggest traits or skills that somebody has to develop when trying to achieve a goal are prioritization and grit. What I mean by prioritization is the word priorities. So if you've ever said that this is my number 1 priority, when you say this is my number 1 priority, that means that that one thing you're referring to is more important to you than everything else in your life at that current moment. No matter the circumstance, no matter the condition, this thing matters more to you than everything else. And so you try to get this done first. You try to get it done with the most urgency. The reason why I say prioritization is because most guys, when they're trying to get bigger, do not prioritize their meals, their training, or their recovery. And they say, well, I'm trying to get bigger, but I don't have time to eat, or I don't have time to train, or I can't get enough sleep. That means that you're not actually trying that hard, because there are other things that you're putting above getting jacked. Now, I'm not saying that your family, that your job, if you're a student in school, I'm not saying that that stuff is less important. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that there are other things in your life that you do that if you really wanted to get jacked, you'd put above those things. And so that comes down to you. I cannot change your prioritization. I can only make you aware of it so that you can choose to make that change yourself. But you have to prioritize it at some level. If you have this thing, this thing, this thing, this thing, this thing, this thing, and you have 30 other things before you have getting jacked, if it really comes down to it, if you are crammed for time, you're going to be doing all these different things with more urgency than eating all of your meals, training hard, and getting to bed on time. And so it would make sense that you don't have good results because this thing comes as the 52nd priority in your life. What I'm saying is to move this up the leaderboard. Now, your faith, your family, your job, your relationships, your friends, for you, those might come above getting jacked, obviously, but there are some things that you can probably switch out. The second skill that I think is vastly underrated is grit. We talked about pushing and pivoting earlier. Grit is the ability to push. If you're trying to achieve a goal and you lived in a box and you didn't go outside, and that was the one thing that you had to accomplish in your life, I bet you could probably accomplish it. The ability to push through when things get busy is an ability that most people don't have. And so when people say, I don't have time to go to the gym, I don't have time to eat my meals, I don't have time to do all this stuff, those kind of people who can only achieve things when they have a lot of time only win when they have a lot of time for a long time. I'll say that again. The guys who give time as a reason as to why they can't achieve their goals only win when they have time for a long time. Those guys would need 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years, completely uninterrupted to make any kind of progress. That is the telltale sign of a lack of grit. And so, like I said, the toughest part about making progress is not just the progress itself, it is balancing this with everything else in life. That is grit. If you cannot continue to persist when things get a little rocky and you can't push through this, you're not really going to make it anywhere. You have to have some level of grit in the thing you care about to make results. So these are the 2 skills I'm going to focus on to solve this problem. If we can build these 2 skills, or at least improve them, I'd say that your time management is going to improve a great deal after this video. So we know we have to prioritize getting big and push through when it gets tough. But what do we have to prioritize exactly? Well, there's 3 main aspects of getting bigger, bulking up, that if done together for a long time will result in crazy gains. The thing about meals, training, and recovery is that if you do meals and training but there's no recovery, you're not going to make that many gains. If you're doing training and recovery but not meals, you're not going to make that much gains. And so all 3 need to be done at some level at once in order for you to make progress. And the better you do all 3 of these things, the better your results are going to be. Now, with recovery, I'm mainly referring to sleep and stress management, but we're going to focus on sleep. I've already made a video on getting better sleep, so I won't go too deep here, but we're shooting for 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night. As for training, most of your workouts are not going to be longer than 90 minutes. You'd be training for 90 minutes a workout on average, 3 to 4 days a week. You don't need 6, 7, 8 workouts a week to make any kind of progress. Most people will see really good results off 3 to 4. Where it gets really tough is the meals, because you might be eating 3 meals a day and then you're bulking up and all of a sudden you're eating 5 meals a day. How do we manage the extra cooking? How do we manage the extra food? How are we able to manage our time with each of these meals so we can eat them on time and not eat late? There's a bunch of questions that arise here. And so I'm not going to focus on these 2, because the problems that come from you wondering if you should stop your bulk or not are not coming from your training or your recovery. It's coming from the food. And so we'll get rid of this. I'll say that you're eating 4 meals a day. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4. And you eat these meals at 8 a.m., 12 p.m., 5 p.m. if you get off work at that time, and 8 p.m. These are the meal times that you've set for yourself. A big part about digesting food properly is that you want to space the meals out as far as you possibly can. So if you're sleeping for 8 hours a day, let's just say, if there's 24 hours in a day, you now have 16 hours left to do everything else you need to do throughout the day. That includes eating your meals. So you'd want to space these meals out as far as you possibly can, given the amount of time that you have that you're awake. If it's 16 hours divided by 4 meals, ideally, we want these meals to be around 4 hours apart. And if you look at our times, 8 to 12 is 4 hours apart, 12 to 5 is 5 hours apart, 5 to 8 is 3 hours apart. So on average, these meals are 4 hours apart, which is great. The problem is, this isn't exactly reality. Things get in the way, you have scheduling conflicts, and sometimes you need to adjust these meal times. I'm going to show you what happens when you do that, when you change the times you plan to eat and how it affects everything else in your life, and not just fitness-wise, I mean everything. Here's what I mean by prioritization. Prioritization would mean getting these meals in at these times and not letting anything else get in the way. Not letting family, not letting business, not letting work. Nothing gets in the way of these meal times. When it is 12 o'clock, when that time strikes, you eat immediately. The problem with not prioritizing is when it's 12 p.m. and you're supposed to be eating, but you don't have your meal anywhere near you, and you decide, I'm gonna keep working, so I'm gonna push this meal back. I'll push it back to 2 p.m. Now you don't eat at 12, you eat at 2. You'll notice that there is a massive amount of space here between meals 1 and 2, but that's not really the big problem. The big problem is that these meals are now closer together. So you went from 12 to 5 to 2 to 5. Now these two meals, meals 2 and 3, you now have less time in between them to digest and process the food. The closer these two times get to each other, the harder it's going to be to process the food. Because if you're bulking up, and if you've been bulking up for months now, you know that cramming meals together, if you have meals 2 and 3, and you have to push them together, it's very uncomfortable because it's already hard enough to eat this meal. It's even harder to eat another meal right after that. And so ideally, you want to be spacing them out far enough so you have time to digest. This is not very far apart. 3 hours is not very far apart for 2 meals, especially if you're eating a lot of calories. So you eat at 2 p.m. and let's just say you're done all the food at 2:30 and you're eating at 5. You now have 2.5 hours to process all this food before 5 o'clock comes. Realistically, are you going to be eating your next meal at 5 o'clock, or are you going to push it back a little bit in order to recover from this meal here? You're going to push it back, right? So you decide to push this one back, let's just say to 6:30, because you need more time to digest. And so this meal that would have been eaten at 5 o'clock is now eaten at 6:30, which is very good for the time in between, right? Because now we get more time to digest the food. What do you think happens next? This meal and this meal get crammed. And so you could choose to push the meals together and eat back-to-back meals, because it never feels good to power through a meal and barely get it down and then have to do another one just like it in half an hour. So you eat this meal at 6:30 and you finish it at 7. You now have 1 hour to digest that food before you eat another massive meal. And so again, not ideal. What do you do in this situation? Are you going to cram these meals? Probably not. What are you going to do? You're likely going to push this meal back even further. So this 8 p.m. meal now becomes, let's just say, 9:15. You push it back 1 hour and 15 minutes, which is great because this 6:30 meal now has a lot of time to digest. But what happens here? We're eating 1 hour and 15 minutes later, which means we're going to be getting to bed 1 hour and 15 minutes later. And that kind of goes against our third rule of getting jacked, which is to get to bed on time. You can clearly see how one small change, it's kind of like a butterfly effect. These small changes that seem almost meaningless at the time, with your original meal that was right here, if that gets pushed back, it now pushes back all the other meals that you were supposed to eat throughout the day. And so that leads to you getting to bed later. It leads to you having less time to digest. You're going to have more acne. You'll be more lethargic. You will have a bloated gut. You will sleep worse. And enough of those days compounded over each other again and again and again will eventually lead to you either having bad digestion for the entirety of your bulk, which is going to be horrible for muscle growth, or you're going to start skipping meals because you don't want to deal with these delays anymore. And so you're going to skip meals to avoid that. But what happens when you skip meals? You're missing calories. So you can see how it gets really tough to manage this with everything else, because if you have 4 meals a day, let's just say you have 1, 2, 3, 4 meals a day, you now have to do everything else in your life in between these 4 meals. And so that doesn't give you much time to do a ton of other things if you're trying to get good at this one goal. Now, this video assumes that you're trying to build the most amount of muscle possible. And so it's going to take some level of prioritization getting these meals in on time. The easiest way by far that I've found to get each meal in on time is to set an alarm. Set an alarm for every single meal, or at least let yourself know that it is time to eat. Because if you're eating your meals at 8 a.m., 12 p.m., 5 p.m., and 8 p.m., as these times strike, every minute that you're not spending eating is now pushing back against the other meals and the other tasks you have to do throughout the day. So if you set alarms, making yourself aware of these times, the goal of the alarm is to distract you. Now, I'm somebody who likes to stay focused, but the goal is for it to distract you so that you stop what you're doing and you go eat immediately. Because if this is a goal that matters to you and you want to keep building muscle and you want to keep bulking up, you have to get the meals in on time. Because if you're pushing them back, you're not going to last very long and your results are going to reflect that. So make sure that that alarm is set for those times. So if I'm eating at 8 a.m., 12 p.m., 5 p.m., and 8 p.m., I'm going to set alarms for 8 a.m., 12 p.m., 5 p.m., and 8 p.m. When they ring, I eat immediately. When I eat immediately, I do not do anything else. I do not take calls. I do not have long conversations. I do not argue with people in person or online. I don't watch movies. I only do what will help me get the meal done faster. And so for you, if that's listening to music, if that's doing nothing at all, just eat. Do one task at a time. And I promise you, not only will you be able to get that one task done quicker, but your focus during that task is going to be 100%. If you're trying to achieve a goal, if all of your attention is centered on you getting to this goal, then it's pretty easy to get clear on what you need to do. But if you have a bunch of other branches sticking out, not only will they be taking away from this initial goal, but as you take on more tasks, your ability to devote attention to these tasks gets smaller. And so now you're this super busy guy who's not good at anything. I like the phrase, jack of all trades, master of none, because you can be someone who does all these fancy different things, but if you're not good at any of them, then it's not really that impressive. And the only way to get really good at things is to put a lot of your focus into it and then do it for a long time. You can set alarms, and the more things that you keep track of, the more conscious you are of where your time is going, then the easier it's going to be to section things off throughout the day. All I'm saying is, if you have your meals, your 4 meals a day, live your life and do everything you need to do in between these meals. But I want you to be aware that when it's time to eat, you just eat. You just do this one thing. So many guys put all of their attention into the gym and thinking that their workouts is going to build a physique entirely. And that's not true at all. You need to eat the right foods. You need to eat enough for those foods. And you need to do it consistently for a long enough period of time without stopping in order to see results. It's also a good thing to sleep a lot. And so you eat, live your life, eat, live your life, eat, live your life, eat. Then you sleep at the end of the day. And guess what this sleep does for the rest of your tasks? It makes you better at everything else you do. There's not a single human in history who runs off no sleep and performs better off somebody who runs off enough sleep. I found that getting good sleep makes me better at literally everything I do, from talking to people, from eating, from working. I stay more focused. I'm better in the gym. I don't make silly mistakes or say stupid things that I normally would say if I was exhausted. If you're getting enough sleep, it amplifies everything that you do. So eating, maybe you find a little block in here to train. There's your training, and then you live the rest of your life. So this is what your day largely looks like if you're trying to get jacked. You have your meals, your life, your meals, your life, your meals. You go work out, and then you go to bed. This schedule is exactly what I've followed to take myself and the guys I work with from skinny to jacked. It just requires prioritization of the things that matter most. That's how I solve time constraints. But how do you know when to push through when it gets tough, or pivot out to a different strategy, or quit entirely? How do you know when to push or when to pivot? I'm going to show you. On the left is going to be the situations that we would push through, and on the right side are going to be the situations that we pivot in, that it's not worth it for us to keep pushing through, and we find another way around the problem, or we disregard the problem entirely. All right, the first push situation, a circumstance where no matter how difficult it might seem, you always push through, is anything that you can describe, I can't do it because. When I hear somebody say this, and believe me, I've heard it a lot, whatever the reason they give for I can't do it because, I personally translate this as I don't know what to do. So if we look at the reason that they use, I can't do it, I can't eat all my meals because I don't have enough time. I can't train 5 days a week because I have a kid. I can't train or eat because I have a busy job. Whatever the reasoning that they give you, I can't do it because, whatever words come after because, I immediately translate that as I don't know what to do. I have a lack of knowledge or at least a lack of knowledge in the steps needed to execute to get this result. So I'll explain what I mean. When you're trying to solve a problem, this applies, mainly in business, but it applies actually in a lot of other domains. There are two types of knowledge. The first one is declarative knowledge. The easiest way I can explain this is knowing that something exists. This is knowing or being aware of the process needed to get a certain result. So there's people who will give sales advice who have never done sales. There are people who will give fitness advice or throw a bunch of articles at you that don't have any of the results that you want to get. And so these people may have a lot of declarative knowledge. They might be aware of the steps needed to solve the problem, and their information very well might be correct. You have the information, but you don't have any of the second type of knowledge, which is procedural knowledge. This is knowing the real steps in the process, and you know these steps not only because of research, but you know these steps because of experience. You have lived through it from start to finish. Now, it doesn't mean you have to be the best in the world to have procedural knowledge, but you have to have some level of results, some level of feedback from this process to be able to understand how it works. And so procedural knowledge people, at least people who have more of this, are not illiterate. It's not that they don't read articles or they don't have any outside information coming in. It's just that most of their knowledge comes from lived experience. People who rely more on declarative knowledge get more of their information from other people's experiences or studies or different things like that. They haven't actually lived through it. And so for me personally, I will always listen to somebody who has less declarative but more procedural knowledge versus somebody who has more declarative and less procedural. What I'm trying to say is, if you're trying to achieve a goal, first listen to the people who have achieved the goal you're trying to achieve and are documenting it. The second best type of person to listen to is somebody who is actively doing it and failing along the way and documenting that. And so if you don't know what to do, the answer is to learn. If you don't know how to save time during your meals, I have a video for that. If you don't know how to train for 2 hours a week, I have a video on that. If you don't know how to get better sleep, I just uploaded a video on that. There's always solutions to problems that you don't think have solutions for, essentially. If you do not know what to do, that is a knowledge gap. It's not because the problem is too hard or it's physically impossible. Like, it's physically impossible for me to jump up in the air and start flying like Superman, right? That's not real. It doesn't exist, at least yet. It's impossible for me to jump up and start hovering. But it is possible for me to eat 4 or 5 meals a day. It is possible for me to go to the gym 3 to 4 days a week. It is possible for me to get 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night. It is possible. It's just you lack, like the original 2 skills, prioritization and grit. The ability to move fitness up your priority leaderboard, and when it gets tough, push through and keep doing the things you need to do. The things you need to do are eat all of your meals, train hard, get to bed on time. That's why I'm so huge on those 3, because they're the 3 actions that you have to pull off every single day over time to get crazy results. If you can't do it because X, that is a knowledge gap. And the answer to that question is to learn, which is why I put the videos up on this page. The second situation that I'd recommend you push through is having bad digestion. Now, with bad digestion, this is an actual issue that guys face when they're bulking. And so how I break down bad digestion is in 3 separate ways. I'll write them out right here. The first one is having poor meal timing. So we talked about earlier the ability to prioritize your meals throughout your day. So let's just say I have 4 meals right here. You'd want to be eating these meals at those times, because if you delay this meal and eat it at this time, then now these meals are too close together. And so the more you continue to push back your meals, the harder it is for you to get them in. The easiest way, like I said, is to get an alarm. Just look at your schedule. Look at when you work. Look at when you spend time with your kids, when you spend time working on the business. Look at the times of day where you can spare 15 to 20 minutes to eat. And if you can't spare that time, then I'd recommend having meals that you can take with you on the go. You can have shakes, sandwiches, granola, nuts, protein bars. Your meals don't have to be steak, potatoes, rice, and vegetables in a big container. You can have that food blended up into a shake or put into a sandwich. Your meals don't have to be eaten on a ceramic plate. You can put them in a container and take them with you. Find the holes, find the parts in your day where you can fit these meals in. When I was working my full-time job and I was washing cars, I would take a big bite of food and then eat as much as I possibly could, go to work. Once that bite was swallowed, I'd go get another bite, then go back to work. So I'm working while I'm eating. And some people might not like the idea of that. You might prefer to sit down while you're eating. Sometimes it's not always perfect. You got to deal with it. Make sure that your meal timing is on par. If you know you're supposed to have 4 meals a day at specific times, when those times hit, eat the meals. Do not compromise. Another sign that you're getting bad digestion is the intolerance of certain foods or the insensitivity to certain foods. So I'll start with this one. If you find that you're eating dairy products every day, and then over time you start to develop stomach aches or symptoms of lactose intolerance, it's a very good sign that you have developed some sort of tolerance to dairy. It's very possible that eating too much of one food or changes in your gut health can lead to intolerances, meaning you cannot process that food, you cannot digest it, you're having really bad poops, you're feeling nauseous, you're feeling sick. That's a pretty good sign to stop the food, obviously. A different way of looking at this, and something I don't hear a lot of people talk about, is the insensitivity to certain foods. So I'll use myself as an example. My second or third bulk, I don't remember which one it was, but it was about a couple years ago. I was 198 pounds in this picture here. And you could see I looked pretty chubby. And the weird thing about this picture is I actually wasn't fat. So I'll explain what I mean. And this isn't me making excuses. 60% of my calories came from carbs. And almost all of those carbs came from this Uncle Ben's converted long grain white rice. I remember it clear as day. Almost all of my 60% of my calories came from this rice. What happened was I was inexperienced at the time and I thought I could just have rice with every meal. I ate 5 meals a day and 3 to 4 out of those 5 meals contained a lot of rice. Now, the problem with this is that I ate so much rice. I think I was bulking for 7 months straight at that point. I ate so much rice for 7 months straight that I eventually developed an insensitivity. I wasn't able to process the nutrients in that food. When you develop an insensitivity towards certain foods, your body will store more water as a response. And so this picture that you see, I wasn't actually that high of body fat. If I flexed my abs, they were clearly visible. It just, I looked puffy because I had so much water in my face and in my midsection. And to get rid of this look, I didn't even go on a cut. I just went at my maintenance and then did a small recomp. I think I went like 100 calories below my maintenance, and I went from this to this in just a couple months. So it didn't take me that long to completely change my look around. What I'm saying here is that this can happen with anything. And for me, it happened with rice, but if you're having chicken breasts every day, if you're having eggs, not only do you have an insensitivity, can you develop an insensitivity to the nutrients, but that food also becomes harder to eat. If there's one food in your diet that you know that you're constantly eating again and again and again, and you notice over time it's taking you progressively longer to eat that meal with that food in it, it's a pretty good sign to switch it out. So I'll leave a picture on screen of different bulking foods, things that are high calorie, relatively healthy, easy to chew. You can pretty much swap one for the other. I mean, if the food that you're eating is high in protein, switch it for another high protein food. If it's a high in carb, switch it for high carb, and so on. The insensitivity can happen for the nutrients. It can also happen for you just trying to eat the food because your body's sick of it. The third most obvious sign of having bad digestion is having bad sleep. If you cannot sleep at night, if you notice that your stomach's rumbling, or you find that you're staying up, you're doing all the right things, you watched my sleep video, and you're doing all the right things to get to bed on time, to fall asleep fast, and you just find yourself laying there wide awake for no reason, it's a very good sign that your body is not processing the food you're eating. Now, I use this example in the sleep video, and if I'm being honest, I came up with it on the fly, but I thought it was pretty good. When you're about to go to bed, it makes sense to make the last meal you eat smaller. More specifically, if you're eating, let's just say 5 meals a day, I try to make that last meal 15 to 20% max of my total calories. So if my bulk is 3,000 calories a day, ideally I'd want this last meal to be around 450 to 600 calories. Why do I say this? Well, the example that I was mentioning earlier, now I'm sure this happens in other businesses too, but if you worked in fast food and if you've ever worked a closing shift and you're cleaning all the equipment and you seem like you're all good to go, then somebody comes in 5 seconds before you close and asks, can I have this, and this? And you're like, shoot, we just cleaned all the equipment. Now we have to fire it all up and then clean it again after just for this one person. Kind of frustrating, especially when you're about to leave. It's kind of like having a huge meal right before you sleep, because if you're putting down so much food before you go to bed, your body's now having to fire up all the digestive systems to process a huge meal that it was not expecting. And when you're trying to digest a huge meal, your body temperature is going to rise significantly, which makes it really hard for you to fall asleep. It's also pretty uncomfortable to sleep with a big bloated gut. So if your sleep is bad, the first thing I'd look at is making that last meal smaller. If the last meal is already small, I would question what's in the meal. If you already have good meal timing, you're not dealing with intolerances or insensitivities to food, but you do get bad sleep, I would take a look at what's inside of that last meal before you go to bed. Ideally, you want to avoid artificial sugars, high dietary fats, and extremely high amounts of other simple carbs, and even super high protein. And by super high protein, I mean like double what you'd usually have. If you typically have 40 grams of protein in a meal, probably not ideal to make the last meal 80 grams of protein. So just use your own judgment with that. The reason why you wouldn't want a lot of artificial sugar is because you can spike your insulin. It's going to give you a lot of quick energy before you go to bed. Not ideal. Fats take longer to digest. So like having a big meal, it's going to fire up those digestive systems. And so it takes longer to process this fat. Simple carbs work in a similar way as artificial sugar does. You're going to have that spike of energy. And protein kind of works like the fat. We don't want to have way too much of one macronutrient or another because it makes it hard either for the body to digest it or for the body to calm down after it gets a bunch of energy. Now, obviously, don't take caffeine before you go to bed. The sleep video I made covers pretty much all of that stuff. But if you're having bad digestion, these are the 3 things that I would look at in order of importance. So the first thing by far, nail your meal timing. Then look at the foods you're eating. Do you have any intolerances? Are you having insensitivities to the nutrients in the food or the time it takes you to eat that food, which can affect your meal timing? And are you getting bad sleep? If all 3 of these are nailed and you're confident in your ability to knock down all 3 every single day, and you're still having digestive problems, then you can get digestive supplements, digestive enzymes, which help me personally, especially as you're eating more food. Glucose disposal agents are also very good. They're called GDAs. These help me digest and process the food much better. If you can nail everything here every single day, which 99.9% of people don't do, but if you are nailing all of these and you're still having bad digestion, I would seek a medical professional because I think that the solutions that you're looking for cannot be solved with these things. But I would try these first, absolutely, before looking at any medication, any prescription drugs, stopping bulking, right? That's what this video is about, right? We're not trying to stop bulking. We want to stay in that calorie surplus as long as possible. And then if all else fails, cut down. The third situation I'd recommend you push through is thinking that you're too fat. Now, this probably goes against all bulking philosophies, but I'll show you what I mean. When you think you're too fat, it doesn't always mean that your body fat levels are too high. Now, oftentimes, yes, that can be the case. But if you're looking at a fat physique, you typically think of somebody who has minimal definition and a really wide waist. They don't have any separation in the abs, in the chest, not much vascularity, and their waist is quite big. But that doesn't necessarily mean that if this is you and you're looking a little bit fluffier than you normally do, it doesn't mean you immediately stop bulking. Now, when you're bulking up, like I said, your waist is not going to get smaller. It is going to get bigger. Just because it gets bigger, just because you lose a little bit of definition, doesn't mean you stop right away. That extra size that you gain in your face or on your waist could be the result of multiple different things. The first one is outside stress. So when you're stressed out, either because of work, because of family, because of inconveniences in daily life, if you're feeling like you're perturbed and you're always stressed out, that's going to increase your cortisol. And when your cortisol gets increased, you hold more water. You're also more prone to fat gain, meaning the weight that you're going to gain, more of that is going to be fat. I've said it a bunch of times that I think the goal of bulking up is not to put weight on the scale, but to speed up muscle growth. And that means you're going to gain some weight. The idea of bulking up for muscle growth is that we want the maximum amount of weight. Let's just say you gain 1 pound a week. If you're gaining this 1 pound a week, we want the maximum amount of that 1 pound to be muscle. If you're gaining 0.9 of these 1 pounds in fat and water, it's not a very good thing. And so we want to be able to have the most amount of this weight be muscle. If you're stressed out and your cortisol spikes up, and the more it spikes up for longer, more of that weight is going to be fat. You are going to be more prone to fat gain. This doesn't mean that you are a fatty, that you're eating too much food. It could just mean that you're stressed out. Another reason for looking fatter and not necessarily being fatter, I mentioned it earlier, I don't know if you caught it, is the insensitivity to the foods you're eating. Meaning that food is going in and out. Your body is not processing any of it, and you could just be holding extra water from eating the same foods over and over and over and over again. And so it'll give you the appearance that you are looking fat, but that doesn't mean the actual amount of fat on your body has increased. So that's also something to look out for. This one's probably the biggest one. You're just bloated. When you're constantly eating food, when you're eating food too frequently, you're having 4, 5, 6 meals a day, and you're eating more calories than you normally would, your body has less of a break to be able to process that food in between each meal. So that's why I'm a huge proponent, someone who's really focused on getting the meals in on time, because you give yourself that time to digest the food. If you're not giving yourself, if you have your 4 meals a day, right, and you decide to delay this meal, and you push it right here, you now have less time in between these 2 meals to process the food. And so the more you delay the meals, the more you cram them together, it's going to give your body less of an opportunity to process that food. The more you do that for the longer amount of time, your body never gets a break. There's always going to be a lot of food in your stomach at once. If you're bulking up at 3,000 calories a day and your maintenance is usually 2,000, and you feel like you're getting bloated, you feel like there's always too much food in your stomach at once, try this. I've never seen anybody else talk about this before. Try a defeed. What is a defeed, George? Great question. This is kind of a name I came up with. If you're to look at somebody who's cutting, who's in a calorie deficit, they're eating less calories. And some days they'll have a refeed day, meaning they'll eat more calories than they normally would. And that typically includes more carbs. So let's just say they have a refeed of 500 calories. On that day, they're going to eat 500 calories of mostly carbs. A defeed is the opposite of that. You're purposely eating less food. So let's just say you have a defeed of 500 calories and you eat 500 calories less of carbs. This is an opportunity for your body to take a break, a 1-day break from that bloat. I promise you, if you feel like you're bloated right now at the calories you're eating, run a defeed for the next 3 days. So just eat 500 less calories for the next 3 days of mainly carbs, and your stomach is going to go right back down. You'll have your shredded six-pack in no time. And you'll prove to yourself right away that you're not fat, you're just bloated. So that doesn't mean that you should immediately stop your bulk. If you're bloated, that's a great sign that your digestion is not as good as it could be, which we just talked about. That's why I covered it earlier. If you feel like you're bulking up and you're too fat, that doesn't mean you immediately stop bulking, don't try anything else, and go on a hard cut. It typically means that you're either super stressed out from other things that are going on in life. If so, I'll have a link in the description of how I personally mitigate most stressors. You either have an insensitivity to food, meaning you're eating too much of the same foods, your body's not processing it and it's holding on to more water, or you're just plain bloated from eating too much food too often. And my solution for that would be take a defeed day, or if you need a longer period of time rather than just 1 or 2 days, go back down to maintenance. If you're eating 3,000 calories on your bulk, if you're eating 3,000 calories and your maintenance is 2,000, immediately go down to 2,000 calories the next day and just spend the next 2 weeks there and just chill out. Take 2 weeks of maintenance and then decide to bulk up from there. You'll find that if you go on this short little maintenance break, this 2-week break, once you start adding more calories, you'll end up weighing more than you did before at 3,000 calories, only eating, let's just say 2,400. You're not going to lose a bunch of weight going from your bulk calories to your maintenance calories and then slowly bulk back up. Most times you'll actually end up heavier and looking leaner. Why is that? Because you give your body an opportunity to rest. You're eating too much food, too much of the same foods, too frequently, without giving your body a break. You're not fat, you're probably just bloated. Stress, insensitivity, bloat. Those are the 3 things I would look at. There's probably other reasons as to why you're feeling fatter. Those are going to be the big 3. Let's talk about our pivots. These are situations that I personally don't see a point in pushing through. It gets to a point where you're trying to deal with inconveniences. If we're pushing through and then we have these little roadblocks that we have to deal with, it gets to a point where you're pushing through as hard as you can And then you run into a roadblock that's so big that even if you get past it, it's not even that worth it to solve it. So you get to this point, and then you either turn around and stop, or you try to find a different way over the problem. And I'll show you the top 3 that I consider pivot scenarios. So let's talk about those. These ones are going to be a little on the extreme side, because I believe that in most cases, you can push through. But there are times when it's just simply not worth it. If you literally cannot afford to eat your food, you cannot afford groceries, you have $0 in your bank account, that's going to be a problem because we need to eat more food to bulk up. Now, if you were 100 pounds overweight, this actually wouldn't be the worst thing in the world because all you have to do is eat less and move. But we're on the opposite end of the spectrum. If you cannot afford to eat, I don't always think this is true. This is kind of a push/pivot scenario. What I mean by this is just because money is tight doesn't mean you cannot bulk up. So I'll give you my little tips here to help you bulk for cheaper. First off, buy your groceries in large quantities. Buy them in bulk. Why do we want to do this? Well, when you buy groceries past a certain point, when you buy groceries past a certain point, you can actually reduce the cost per serving size by up to 30%. So an item that was typically $1, if you buy enough of them, it might actually be 70 cents. So you can save money that way. The next way I'd look at this, and it seems a bit unconventional, is to rely off incomplete protein sources. Now, typically you want to have complete proteins, foods that have all 9 essential amino acids. What are incomplete protein sources? These are foods that have protein in them, but not all 9 essential amino acids. Now, I'm not going to dive into the science here. Basically, incomplete proteins are less capable of improving muscle protein synthesis, which is the process of building new muscle through protein. They're not as effective as complete sources of protein, but it's still protein at that. And most of the time, incomplete protein sources are much, much, much cheaper than complete protein sources. So you could build a good physique just off incomplete proteins. It's just that you're not going to build as much muscle as somebody who has complete protein sources. Now, some examples, anything that's not really meats or whey protein powder, like if you look at rice, beans, breads, pastas, probably some vegetarian foods. There's a lot of vegetarian foods that are incomplete protein sources. These are just some off the top of my head. There is protein in these foods, but it's not the kind of protein or the amount of protein that you'd consider this food a high protein food. And so I would look towards that. Incomplete protein sources are going to be a lot cheaper, especially if you combine them together. But still buy some complete protein sources just to have something in there, some eggs, some meats, some whey protein, that kind of stuff. The next thing I suggest, and this probably should have been the first thing I mentioned, is look at your expenses. Where is your money going out? I'm not necessarily concerned with your income, how much money you're earning. I'm more focused on where you're spending your money. Now, the human essentials for survival are water, food, and shelter/clothing. What I mean is if you say you can't afford to bulk up, but you're wearing $300 Jordans, question your priorities, right? That's why I wanted to talk about prioritization in the beginning so that we use that as a foundation for everything else. If you care about your Jordans more than you care about building muscle, then by all means, buy the Jordans. But just know that the money that you spend on the things that are not going to get you closer to that goal of getting jacked. If you're tight on money, your expenses, every dollar matters. So if you're wasting money on nights out, drinks with the boys, and you're not buying the proper groceries, you're spending money on events that aren't free. Actually, I'll put this as number 4. We need more room here. Paid friend events, right? This isn't just about bulking. This is about saving money in general. If your friends, every time they want to hang out with you, it's always drinks with the boys, or come to this concert with us, or come to the club and drop $500 on drinks. If you're trying to get jacked and you're doing all the right things to build as much muscle as possible, and the only events that you have, the only social events you have, are ones that are paid to get into, and you have to pay what feels like a lot of money to you to hang out with your friends, first of all, I'd question, the first thing I'd look at is, am I actually having fun because of the event or because of the people I'm with? If it's the people, if those friends are worth keeping, then hang out with your friends and find free activities. Go train together, go take a walk, hang out, maybe get some food. You don't have to drop 100, 300, 500 bucks every time you go out for a social event. And so I would cut these out immediately. I would look at your expenses. Now, the paid friend events is one of the first things I'd look at when it comes to your expenses, but also look at what kind of food you're buying. Are you ordering DoorDash? Are you ordering Uber Eats? Are you buying fancy clothes? Are you doing things that do not contribute to your goals? The fifth way you can easily save money is to have less grocery trips. Now, I'm not talking about the money that you spend that comes out of your bank account. I'm also talking about your time. If you're going to the grocery store and the grocery store is 15 minutes away, and you do that trip there and back, that's 30 minutes. You do that twice a week, that's an hour gone. If you don't have a high income job, and let's just say you're earning $20 an hour, that hour of driving is taking away $20 every single week. Now, this $20 doesn't seem like much, but if you're doing this every single week, that is $1,040 a year gone just from traveling. What I recommend is if you're buying large quantities of the right foods, first of all, you're going to get those foods for cheaper because you're buying them in bulk. Second of which, you won't have to make multiple grocery trips. And so if you're buying all of your foods in one shot, which is what I do for the grocery list for the guys I work with, their grocery trips take them 10 minutes a week because they're not spending any extra time buying more groceries. They follow the list that I give them and they buy the exact amounts to follow the meals on their plan. And so they get jacked, they save time, they save money. Everything works out perfectly. Go to the grocery store less, have free friend events, look at your expenses. Are your priorities matching your goals, right? If you're showing me your bank account, I'm seeing 30 bucks on Uber Eats, 50 bucks on clothing, 60 bucks on drinks at the club, right? I know where your priorities are at. And those priorities are not in getting bigger, not in building muscle. When you go to the store, look for incomplete protein sources, cheap carbs, pasta, rice, potatoes, granola, nuts, bread products. These foods are going to have protein, not complete protein sources, but you can mix and match and save a ton of money that way. I promise you, you can easily save money if you follow those 5 things. The next pivot that I would look for is you're legitimately getting too fat. But George, didn't you just say that this is a push situation? Not exactly. What I meant about this in this section is that it is the perception of being fat through too much stress, the insensitivities to food, and feeling bloated because you're eating so much food all of the time. This situation of actually being too fat is because your body fat levels have risen to a point where it is unreasonable for you to keep bulking up. Because like I said, if this is your maintenance calories right here, and you're eating in a calorie surplus, you are not going to get leaner the further you go down this line. You are going to gain more fat the further you go down. And so if you're at a point right here, it doesn't make sense to keep bulking up if you're obese. The final situation I'd say is valid as a pivot is that I don't want to bulk anymore. And this is absolutely fair. You don't have to build as much muscle as humanly possible. I assume that if you're watching this video, that is your goal. But if it's not, and you just want to go from 130 to 150 pounds, you don't have to run 5, 6, 7 bulk and cut cycles. You just might get there from 2 or 3. So if you're running multiple bulks and you feel like you're having bad digestion, you look like you're getting fatter, people are commenting about it, your face is getting puffy, 99% of these issues can be pushed through and solved. But if it's not your ultimate goal to build as much muscle as possible, there's nothing wrong with just stopping. If you don't want to bulk, that is okay. I'll show you later on in the video how to properly stop a bulk and then move into a maintenance phase and then a cut. But if you just don't want to do it anymore, that's 100% valid. And I think that is perfectly fine for a pivot scenario. Not everyone who goes to the gym wants to be a jacked bodybuilder or walk around looking huge. Some people just want to put on 15 or 20 pounds, stay lean, and that'll be it. And if you're doing the right things that we talk about in this video, it's not going to take you very long. I'll give a quick analogy for this and then we'll move on to the next section. So when people say, I want to go to the gym, but my goal isn't to get huge or get super jacked, I just want to build a little bit of muscle, I say that's perfectly fine. Getting jacked, I'm going to draw it out here, is like getting on an elevator. And so you get on this elevator. If this is you will get on this elevator the same way the super jacked guy will get on the elevator. Both of you have different goals. You want to build a little bit of muscle. The jacked guy wants to get as jacked as humanly possible. But the elevator still works the exact same. It still goes up and down. You still have to eat all of your meals, train hard, get to bed on time, eat, train, sleep, and do these things every single day. The difference between you and the super jacked guy is that this guy wants to go to a higher floor. And so he will do this stuff more intensely, more consistently, for longer than you will. And you'll be more intense, you'll be more consistent, you'll do it longer than some other people. Some people don't want to get as jacked as you do. Some people want to get way more jacked than you do, and that's perfectly fine. But you still both have to ride the exact same elevator, which is eat, train, and sleep. Another reason why I love this elevator analogy so much is that you get in the elevator, you eat, train, and sleep every single day, and once you get to the floor you want to get to, right, you push the button and you wait, you give it time, you get to the floor you want to get to, you can either decide to go up a floor, to stay at the exact same floor, or go down a floor. Once you get to this goal floor, you can try to get bigger, stay the exact same, or try to lean out. But once you get to that goal floor, it's 10 times easier. It's literally 10% of the effort to maintain your physique once you get it, rather than trying to get to that physique for the first time. So getting there is the tough part. Staying there is quite easy. And so if you want to get bigger, it's going to take more effort. If you want to maintain, it doesn't take much effort at all. And if you want to lean out, then you just run a cut. I personally love this elevator analogy because I think it perfectly paints the fact that just because you don't want to be a humongous bodybuilder or you just want to be lean and athletic but build more muscle, you still have to do the exact same actions as that bodybuilder does. You just don't do them as intensely, as consistently, or as long. Some people want to be more jacked than you do. Some people want to be less jacked than you do. And you're always going to be in the middle. There's always going to be people who want more. There's going to be people who want less. But that does not mean that you skip out on the intensity, you skip out on consistency, and you skip out on doing it for long enough. You still have to do it intensely, consistently, for long enough without stopping to get that result. It's just that the people who want to build more muscle and get bigger than you are willing to do these things for longer. The people who don't want to get as big as you will not do it as intensely, as consistently, or as long. If you don't want to bulk, that is a perfectly valid reason to stop. But whatever your reason is for not wanting to bulk, make sure that you're 100% certain that you do not want to bulk because you just don't want to bulk anymore. Not because it's too hard, not because I have bad digestion, not because I feel like I'm getting too fat. If you seriously do not want to bulk and you're 100% sure, I'm done with this, I think it's cool to call it. I think we've covered every single point and all the questions you need to ask yourself to be 100% sure that you should continue or stop your bulk. But there's one alternative that I have not covered yet. If we're legitimately getting too fat, how do we stop getting fat so that we can keep bulking up? Whenever myself or the guys I work with are getting too fat on our bulks, I run this step-by-step process, and I'm going to show you exactly how I do it so that you can keep bulking. Because you have to understand that we're going to build the most muscle when we're in that small calorie surplus. So the idea is to stay in that calorie surplus for as long as possible. So if you have your maintenance here, we're going to build the most muscle over here. If you've been bulking for some time and you notice that you're getting a little fatter than you'd like to, and you're already nailing your digestion, you don't have intolerances to the foods you're eating, you don't have insensitivities to the foods you're eating on time, and you're getting good sleep, and you're still noticing that you are getting fat, chances are you might be getting fat. So here are 9 questions that you should ask yourself, and these questions will make it very clear if you are or are not on pace to getting fat. The first question you need to ask yourself is, have you been bulking for at least 3 months straight? And the reason why I outline straight is because guys will say, oh, I've been bulking for 6 months, I've been bulking for a year, I've been bulking for 2 years and I haven't put on any weight. And that's fine, but when I ask these guys, are you tracking your calories? The answer is usually no. Do you know how many calories you're supposed to be eating? Oh yeah, like 3 to 3,500. Something like that. Okay, are you reaching this number every single day? Most days out of the week I am, maybe 4 or 5 out of the 7 days. There's your answer right there. You're not bulking consistently. You're not doing it for 3 months straight. Now, there's nothing really special about gaining fat specifically after 3 months. I just want to see at least 3 months of dedication to eating all of your meals, training hard, getting to bed on time. Eat, train, sleep, the core principles, getting jacked. And the guys who are inside of the incredible bulk, I use this exact same logic with them because my guys have their meal plans, right? And so on their meal plan, let's just say they're eating 5 meals a day and I have their calories, their macros, everything is lined out. They're eating 5 meals a day and then they say, hey, I haven't been gaining weight. What's going on? And I can see their weigh-ins and I say, yeah, I know you're not gaining weight. How many out of the 5 meals that you're supposed to eat every single day? And if that's 5 meals a day for 7 days, that's 35 meals. Out of the 35 meals that you're supposed to eat throughout the week, how many are you eating exactly as listed on the meal plan? Instead of just asking them, are you eating enough? I ask them the exact amount of meals that they're eating. Are you eating all 35 meals exactly as prescribed on the meal plan? They're like, probably like 20 to 25. There's your answer right there. You're not consistent. It has to be as close to 100% as possible. It is a 24-hour job. You're constantly making sure that you're getting in the right amount of food. If you're only eating enough to grow 4 out of the 7 days a week, it's not like you miss out on half the results you could have gotten. Getting jacked compounds on itself, so your physique looks exceptionally better the more consistent you are. Gaining muscle is not linear whatsoever. You could have someone with really good genetics who isn't consistent at all, and if you have someone who has average or above average genetics, that guy will crush the good genetics guy every single time if he's consistent with it. So those results compound on each other. Now, genetics matter a ton, don't get me wrong, but what I'm saying is, about this original point, if you are not sticking with it for at least 3 months, number one, you're not going to get the results, but two, and more importantly, you didn't earn it. If you're not sticking with it, if you're not staying consistent, no science article, no training split, no meal plan, no video of mine is ever going to make a difference for you. You have to stick with it. And so, I know we're talking about fat gain here, but I'm also talking about progress. If you have not been seeing gains, ask yourself, have I been consistent for the past 3 months at least 3 months, at a bare minimum? To see those crazy transformations, I'm talking 6 months, 12 months, a year, 5 years of sticking with it, at least 3 months. But we're talking about fat gain here. So if you've been bulking for at least 3 months straight, that means that you have been, if this is your calories and your maintenance, you have been in a calorie surplus for more than 3 months straight, and you've likely increased the amount of calories you're eating over time. So now you're at a point where you're right here. If you can answer yes to this question, then it is more likely than not that you are getting fat. The second question you need to ask yourself is, are your meals taking longer to eat than they did when you first started? So this is an intolerance or insensitivity issue. That's why I brought them up earlier. Intolerance or insensitivity. Are you starting to not like the food that you're eating, which means it takes you longer to eat? Or is your body just simply rejecting the food? If you're getting to a point where you're eating eggs for breakfast every day and you notice that eating the eggs used to take you 5 minutes and now it takes you 20 minutes, it's a very good sign that your body has adapted to that food and doesn't really want it anymore. So it's a good sign to switch it out. I'll put the screenshot up here of the bulking foods, the ones that are high in protein, high in carbs, and high in fat. And so you can switch one of them out for anyone there. But it's something to note, if your meals typically take you 15 to 20 minutes to eat, and now they're taking you 40 minutes to an hour like they did for me, it's a very good sign that your body is adapting to that food, but also it's starting to slow down, and more of the weight that you're gonna gain from that point on will be fat. That's the second question. The third question to ask yourself, are you starting to feel more tired after your meals? So we talked about the consistency of bulking, having to do it for a long enough time to first of all see results, and then if you're eating so much beyond that point, then you end up getting fat. But we first have to reach this point before we experience any kind of fat gain. The second point was about the meals taking longer, that you're starting to develop a resistance to the food. The third is after the meal is done. Are you noticing that you feel a little bit more lethargic? You feel a little more lazy. You don't really have as much of a drive to get work done. If you're progressively getting more tired after your meals, that is a sign that you might be developing some level of insulin resistance. And what this means is when you're taking in food, mostly carbs, there's going to be a level of sugar that comes from those carbs. And instead of that sugar going to your muscles, your fat cells, your liver, that sugar instead stays inside of the blood. And if you're progressively getting more sugar in the blood and the longer it stays there, you are more prone to getting fatter, you're more prone to getting high blood sugar, and then also diabetes. So we don't want to have super high insulin resistance. And what precedes this, what comes before it, is avoiding getting tired after our meals. Are you progressively getting more tired after your meals? That's a decent sign that you're developing some level of insulin resistance. You can typically offset this by changing the foods you eat. or cutting calories, cutting overall sugar intake, and especially artificial sugar intake. The next question is, are you getting more tired while doing everyday tasks? So I talked about getting tired after eating meals, and that can be from the spike in insulin, developing some sort of insulin resistance, or just being plain tired of eating all this food. But if you're doing tasks like tying your shoes or walking upstairs, and you find out that you're out of breath by the end of those, when you weren't out of breath before, it's a pretty good sign that you are on pace to getting fatter, especially if you notice you're getting more tired over time. The fifth question you should be asking yourself, are you getting more tired while you're training? So I was talking about being consistent with the bulk, if the meals are taking longer to eat, if you feel like you're getting tired after those meals, and if you feel like you're getting tired during everyday tasks. And you'll notice with these things that these events will occur in chronological order, meaning as you progress throughout the bulk, you're going to experience these things at some level, and the more you bulk for, the longer you go for, the more intense those events are going to feel, right? The more tired you're going to feel after your meals, the longer it's going to take you to eat. Now I'm talking about training. So when you're training, you're going to have one or more exercises that you do that are considered more fatiguing, that they're more tiring. And what this means is that you are using more muscles, you are using more body parts to pull off that movement. And so the entire body is experiencing some level of feeling tired. Now, an exercise that's not very tiring is a forearm curl, right? You're just doing this, you're twisting with your forearms if you're doing a cable forearm curl. It's not requiring your spine, it's not requiring intense cardio ability, it's not requiring big muscle groups like your legs or your back or your shoulders. It's just requiring your forearms to go like this. If you were to look at an exercise that requires more body parts, I could talk about a barbell back squat, right? You're using your quads, your glutes. Your glutes are the biggest muscle in your body. You're using your hamstrings, your calves, all the supporting muscles to support yourself from squatting up and down. The bar is putting pressure in your spine. There's a whole bunch of things that go into a squat. If you're doing your squats, I'm going to use squats for an example. If you're doing your squats and you always squat to failure, which I assume that you're doing, as you're bulking up further, are you finding that the time in between each rep, so let's just say you go down, you squat down, you do a rep, you do another rep, you do another rep, and then as you do more reps, it's taking you progressively longer to go down to get another rep because you're breathing in between this time. Now that could be because you're getting tired, absolutely. If you're trained to failure, it's going to be exhausting, especially as you're adding more weight to the bar. That makes sense. You absolutely should be getting stronger. But are you noticing that this time is starting to increase? You're starting to need more breaths in between your rep. This extra time here doesn't just happen because the weight's heavier. It can happen because your cardio is getting worse. Or I guess what it leads to is you're getting fatter. Once you get fatter, it's more stress on your body. Your ability to do endurance activities gets worse. Squatting, in some regard, is an endurance activity because if you're doing it for higher reps, it requires a lot of your body to pull it off. But if you notice that this time is getting longer and longer week after week, even if you're doing the same weight for the same reps, it's a very good sign that you're getting fat. And it's not a guarantee, but it's definitely something to look out for. Now, you're not going to notice it on like a forearm curl or like a lateral raise or a barbell bicep curl. You're not going to notice it as much on exercises like that. I would look at it more so on the compound lifts, your squat, your bench, your deadlift, shoulder pressing. If you're pressing with your shoulders and then you have to come down and then press up, right? If those breaths are taking longer and longer and longer over time, good chance that you're getting fat. Of course, look out for the other signals from the questions prior to this and the ones that I'm going to talk about next. The sixth question. The next sign that you might be getting too fat on your bulk is that you're noticing less vascularity even when you're warm. In the winter, when it is, I live in Canada, so we get minus 15, minus 20, minus 25, minus 30 degrees Celsius weather. I can always see less veins on my body in the winter because your body is less concerned with making your arms and shoulders look cool. It would rather keep the blood near the important organs, your liver, your kidneys, your heart, your lungs. It wants to keep the blood in those areas because you need those areas to survive. You don't need veins across your chest, arms, and shoulders to stay alive, but you do need it near the essential organs. So if you're getting less vascular, and not just in the winter, but if it's summer out and you're bulking, are you noticing less veins? If so, there's a good chance you're getting chubbier. Now, some people are more genetically prone to having better vascularity. Some people are genetically prone to have less vascularity. And so it's not about having more vascularity than the people you know, it's about having more or less than what you had before. As you build more muscle, you are also going to look more vascular even at a higher body fat percentage. So it would make sense at the end of your first bulk, when you have the least amount of muscle that you will pretty much ever have, and the most amount of fat because you're at the end of the bulk, that you are less vascular. And if you're getting progressively less vascular, it's a good sign that you're getting fat. Number 7, are you noticing less definition in your face and stomach? So I'll put 2 pictures on screen, one when I was doing my recent lean bulk, and the other one when I was doing one of my first dirty bulks. You can see that even though I'm heavier in weight on the left side here, the right side, my face looks considerably fatter. So if I have my maintenance calories here, I don't remember what actually I can probably find it, I'll put it on screen if I can. I was eating in a calorie surplus around over here. In the second picture, I was eating in a calorie surplus over here. When you're gaining too much weight too quickly, most of that weight is going to be fat. We talked about it earlier, right? The goal of a bulk is to speed up muscle growth, not to put weight on the scale. And so if you're gaining 1 pound a week, let's just say, you want that 1 pound, you want the maximum amount of that 1 pound to be muscle. If 0.9 of that 1 pound gained is fat, then it doesn't really matter. It's not that impressive, nobody cares. And so I was gaining a lot of weight really quickly over here, but I was also gaining a lot of fat, which wasn't the objective, wasn't really what I wanted, but I didn't know what I was doing at the time. You'll notice that as you progress through the bulk more and more, your face will become puffier and puffier, especially if you're gaining a lot of weight. If you only bulk up and you gain 15 pounds over the course of 6 months, that's not that much weight over that amount of time. And so you're gonna stay pretty lean throughout the process, or at least near the same body fat from when you started. What I'm saying is, in month 1, if you don't notice much changes in body fat and you're staying lean but your weight's going up, that's a good thing. If in month 2 you're gaining weight and you're not gaining fat, that's a good thing. And as you progress through the months, you're gonna notice that the amount of fat gain that you put on is going to be more and more if you continue to add calories. If you're continuously adding, let's just say 200 calories each month, as you add those 200 calories, even though you're only adding 200 every single time, you are going to put on considerably more fat as time passes. Why is this? It's like if you have your muscle and your fat on a scale, that muscle is going to go up and that fat is going to go up a little bit. Then over time, the fat is going to outpace the muscle gain. And so you are going to gain significantly more fat as time goes on, as you stay in that surplus. Is your face and stomach getting fatter? Are you noticing that your abs are starting to fade? Very good question to ask. The next one, is my waist getting bigger? If you think of a jacked guy, right? I'm gonna draw my jacked guy again. Let's see if I get better at it. Nice. If you look at a jacked guy, one of the first things you notice consciously or subconsciously is the width of the top of the shoulder here coming down to a tight waist. The waist is always going to be small on somebody you consider jacked. Now you'll have open bodybuilders, you'll have people like the Liver King who are jacked, no doubt about it. But they kind of have a blockier waist like this. And so you'll notice that the proportion here, the small waist to the broad shoulders, this looks much better than this does in every single case. We want to have that V taper. But if you're bulking up, your waist is not going to get smaller because your weight is going up. You're not going to gain 20 pounds and then lose 5 inches on your waist. It just doesn't happen like that. Fortunately and unfortunately, the waist is pretty much a direct reflection of how fat you're getting. There's not really much muscle that is built around the waist the same way it would be on the shoulders, on the arms, on the traps, on the chest, on the legs, on the back. When you look at somebody and they have really big arms, you're like, wow, he has really developed arms. You don't look at somebody and say, wow, he has a really developed waist. There's not much muscle that's being built out here. But If your waist is getting progressively larger and you go from having a thin waist, I'm not saying this is what you look like now, maybe you're a skinny guy and your waist when you started used to be thin, and now you kind of have this little muffin top flowing out the side here, and your abs are less visible, you have less vascularity, your face is now getting rounder, you got this moon face. Good sign you're getting fat. Now, the easiest way to track your waist, like I said, is to get a tape measure, wrap it in between your belly button and your hips, and do that once a week. Some weeks your waist is going to go up, some weeks it's going to go down. Most weeks it should stay relatively the same. And that's why I'm a really big proponent of making the goal of bulking to speed up muscle growth, not to put on weight on the scale, because you could go from 150 to 200 pounds on your bulk. You can easily gain 50 pounds. It's not hard to gain 50 pounds. It is pretty hard to gain 50 pounds of muscle, but anyone can go from 150 to 200 and get fat. If your goal was to put as much weight on the scale as possible, why not go from 150 to 600 pounds? Why not just take it to the max, right? Because you know if you get to this weight, you're for sure gonna be obese. If you also get to this weight super fast from here, you're also going to get obese. You're gonna get extremely fat. And that's because the amount of muscle you gain is never going to be faster than the fat you gain. It's a slow process. It takes time. But if you're consistent, you eat all your meals, train hard, get to bed on time every single day, you cannot lose. You will see results. The tough part is just doing the right stuff for a long time without giving up. Is your waist getting bigger? Yes or no? If it is, I personally have the 2-inch rule. Meaning at any point throughout the bulk, any point at all, whether it's month 1 to month 3, month 1 to month 6, month 1 to month 12. At any point at all, I do not want my waist to go over 2 inches. If I gained 5 pounds in the course of a month, but my waist went up 1.5 inches, it's a very good sign that most of that weight gain was fat, and that's not the weight I want to gain. So keep an eye on your waist. Look at the month to month trend. That's fine if your waist is getting a little bit bigger, but if it's getting bigger than you'd like to, stop adding calories. The 9th and final question you need to ask yourself, are other people commenting on your fat gain? So the other 8 questions you need to ask yourself are ones that you reflect on internally. There are questions that are answered by you. But the 9th one, which I put last on purpose, is because if you're getting good results, if you're getting really bad results, the last person to know is other people. If other people are commenting on you and calling you fat, that is a 100% certainty that you are gaining more fat. It's just that the only person who's denying that is you. You haven't accepted that you actually got fat. I started off, I'll put a picture up here. I was the skinniest guy literally of all time. And I started at 122 pounds. That was me at 16. At that time, if you told me that it was possible for me, George, skinny guy, to get fat, I would have called you crazy. I would have never believed you until I bulked up so hard that my face started to get really round and my abs started to fade. Now, I wouldn't call this fat or obese, but my body fat got pretty high. And so it wasn't until I had friends, and not even friends, but acquaintances, people I barely talked to, calling me fat, I'm like, okay, it's clear that I need to lose some weight. Have you been bulking for at least 3 months straight? Are your meals taking you longer to eat than they normally would? Are you tired after your meals? Are you tired doing recreational activities? Are you tired in the gym? Are you noticing less vascularity? Are you noticing fat gain in your face and your abdomen? Is your waist getting bigger? And finally, the 9th one, are other people commenting? These are the 9 questions you need to be asking yourself if you're bulking up and you're pretty sure you're getting fat, but you want to be 100% certain. If you say yes to all 9 of these questions without hesitation, you, sir, are getting fat. How do we reverse getting fat on a bulk? How do we keep building muscle without getting chubby? I'm going to show you exactly how to reverse out of a bulk taken too far so that you can choose to keep bulking or decide to cut down. If you legitimately think you're getting fat, but you want to keep bulking, you want to keep building more muscle, this is exactly what I do step by step. The first step is to get back down to your maintenance calories immediately. And if you're watching this video, you probably know what that number is, or at least you should. So if this is your maintenance calories right here, and you've been eating in a calorie surplus over here, and you realize that you're actually getting too fat and you want to cut down, I personally suggest dropping calories immediately right back to this range. So if this is 4,000 calories a day for you, this calorie surplus, and you know your maintenance is 2,800, I wouldn't wait a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks to get back down to maintenance. I would just immediately drop it from today to tomorrow. The reason why I suggest the immediate drop is because anything more than your maintenance calories puts you in a calorie surplus. So if you're getting seriously fat, it doesn't make sense for you to go to 3,500 calories, then 3,300 calories, then 3,000 calories, then 2,800 calories. If you know, hey, I'm getting too fat in this calorie surplus, just drop it right away, give your body a break. And that'll reset your insulin sensitivity. Your body will be less exhausted from eating the meals. All those questions that I said to ask yourself earlier, the puffy face, the fat stomach, the loss in vascularity, all those things will come back. Your face will get almost immediately leaner from this, just from a couple days at maintenance. If you go from this high calorie surplus right down to your maintenance calories, the weight you lose is not going to be fat. It's mainly going to be water. And that's going to be water in your face, water in your abdomen, water around your waist. You're going to notice that you're more vascular. Losing a little bit of water is not a bad thing at all, especially when you've been carrying so much of it for so long in your bulk. So I suggest this immediate drop. Now, there probably will be a couple of days where you look and feel flatter, meaning you have less water inside of the muscles. So you have more of like a fat and flabby appearance. That doesn't mean that you've lost all your muscle just because you lost a little bit of weight. You just lost water, and that's not a big deal. If you want to go for that more gradual approach, you want to take a week or two and slowly downstream back down to maintenance, that's okay too. I just prefer the immediate drop so I can give my body a fast reset if I know for sure that I'm getting fat. And once I get my jawline back, once my body resets, I can eat my meals faster, I'm more vascular, basically reversing all of the leading indicators that I'm getting fat. Then we move to step 2. The next step is to stay at that maintenance calories for 1 to 2 weeks. It's not any more amazing than spending 3 to 4 weeks at maintenance or 2 months. I just prefer to stay in a maintenance phase for as little time as possible. Why? Because when you're trying to get jacked, you are either growing or leaning out. Those are the two options you have to improve your physique. Now, both of these can be done at the same time. It's just more effective if you bulk up to grow or if you cut down to lean out. You can get a little bit of both, but the amount of growth you get and loss of body fat is not going to be nearly as much as if you just did one at a time really well. If you're someone who's serious about building a lot of muscle, you want to be in a state of growing for as much as possible without getting fat. And so I only spend 1 to 2 weeks at this maintenance stage, which I just did very recently. Not because I noticed I was getting fat, I was actually staying quite lean. It's just that my meals were taking me considerably longer to eat, and it was affecting my work here at the Incredible Bulk. My meals typically take me 20 to 40 minutes to eat, and then they started taking me 40 minutes to an hour. If I'm eating 5 meals a day, that's 5 hours of eating a day. I don't want to do that if I'm working 10 to 12 hours. So I was eating in a calorie surplus over here, and I immediately dropped back down to maintenance. For me, that's 3,300 calories a day-ish. And so I stayed there for about 2 weeks. Now I'm entering a bit of a cut. The point is, I stayed here to give my body a break. My initial plan was to get back down to this maintenance calories, spend a couple weeks here, and then slowly bulk up, which I'm going to do after this cut. I just want to lose a little extra body fat right now. I recommend you stay there for a couple weeks just to give your body a rest from constantly shoveling in food. Once you're ready to start bulking up again, add more calories. Now, if you're going to be eating at your maintenance, you stay at your maintenance for 1 to 2 weeks, and then you want to keep bulking up. You can't keep bulking up just off this maintenance calories. You're going to have to eat more. But how many more calories do we eat, George? Great question. I personally add, at a time, 5% more calories. What this looks like, if you're eating, I'll write it up here, if you're eating 3,000 calories a day as your maintenance, the next time you change your calories, you'll be eating 3,150. You're adding 150 calories because that's 5% of 3,000. So when do you add this 5% of calories? I don't add it based on the day of the week. I don't add it because I'm a month in. I should be adding calories, or even because of how I look. I mean, that's part of it. But I prefer to add it in based off my weigh-ins, how much I weigh. More specifically, if my weight plateaus. So obviously we want our weight to go up over time. That's not the only goal we have when we're bulking. But if your weight is going up, and then you hit a plateau, you hit a wall, and then suddenly you're at the same weight for weeks on end. The only way to get past this weight, to keep gaining, is to add more calories. I personally suggest the 5% because I don't think adding 500 or 1,000 calories at a time is necessary. If you're adding 5%, let's just say you're right here in your calorie surplus, you add 5%, you're gonna give yourself a little bit of a boost. And then once you plateau, you add another 5%. And you just keep doing that until you get to a point that you're happy eating the calories you're eating, you're progressing, you're not getting fat. But if you were just to add, if your weight gets stuck, it plateaus, and then you just add 1,000 calories, well then you don't know anywhere in between this range, you don't know if any of the calories in between this range is the right amount for you. So I can go from 3,000 to 4,000, but maybe the calories that I should be eating is 3,400. And so I added an extra 600 calories for no reason whatsoever. I think adding 5%, or at least operating off percentages, works much better. You can add 5%, 10%, whatever you want. I prefer to add percentages because I'm cool with gaining 1 to 2 pounds a month if I can almost guarantee that the majority of this 1 to 2 pounds a month is entirely muscle. I'm cool with that. Getting jacked is a game that is played for the long term. If you gain 1 pound of muscle, let's just say, every month, that's 12 pounds of muscle in a year. If you were to do that for 3 years, it's 36 pounds of muscle. You will look drastically different with 36 pounds of muscle on your body. So when do we add the calories? When do we add that 5%? I personally add the 5% once my weight is plateaued for 3 weigh-ins in a row. If my weight has stayed the exact same, it has not budged, it has not gone down a pound, it has not gone up a pound. If my weight has stayed relatively the same or it has gone up by like 0.2 pounds, if my weight has stayed the same for the past 3 weigh-ins in a row, I will add 5% of the calories onto the daily total. And I just keep repeating that process pretty much for the entire bulk. Now, if it's your first bulk ever, maybe you want to eat more calories. Maybe you want to get bigger faster. In my first ever bulk, I gained 31.5 pounds in 9 months and I actually stayed relatively lean. When you're bulking up for the first time, especially if you're skinny and lean like I was, then you can get away with those 10 to 15% jumps in calories easily. You can for sure add 500 calories at a time and be perfectly fine. It's just that the more you bulk, the more often that you do it for longer, those extra calories become less and less useful and get converted to fat more. So I personally add 5% of the calories. You can do the same if you like. That's my process. Get back down to maintenance, stay there for 1 to 2 weeks, and add more calories. If you do not want to decrease the amount of food that you're eating, you want to go, let's just say you're eating 4,000 calories a day, and you don't want to drop down to your maintenance of 2,800, maybe you just want to drop to 3,300. If you know that your maintenance is 2,800 calories and you don't want to drop the food, you could always just do an extra 500 calories worth of cardio. So you can just expend more energy that way. I think it's just faster for the 1 to 2 weeks that you're going to do it. Just drop the food. So go from 4,000 to 2,800 if that's your maintenance. Go from the massive amount of food that you're eating straight down to maintenance and just sit there for 1 to 2 weeks. You'll feel immediately better. You'll look leaner. You'll process the food faster. Your digestion will improve. You won't take as long to eat. You won't feel more tired. You'll look less fat. Stay there for 1 to 2 weeks and then add more calories if you wish to keep bulking. I do 5%. But what if you want to not keep bulking? You decided it's time for me to end this. I am done. I am ready to go back down to maintenance and start a cut. I am ready to stop bulking. What do I do? So if you decide to stop your bulk, this means that we're going on pretty much a cut. What I want to focus on is getting back down to maintenance as soon as possible. Now, I talked about the difference between getting back down to maintenance from a calorie surplus. So if you're right here, this is your maintenance, this is your calorie surplus, and you get back down to this maintenance as soon as possible. If the goal is to stop getting fat, we don't want to make this process slower by lowering calories on a week-by-week basis. We just want to get to this maintenance as fast as we can. So we do that. We get back down to maintenance. Now, assuming that you already know what your maintenance is, that'll be a pretty easy target. You might go from 4,000 calories to 3,000 or 4,000 to 2,800, whatever. Next thing I want you to do is stay there for 1 to 2 weeks. So you'll notice that the process between pausing a bulk to keep going or stopping a bulk entirely is the first 2 steps are pretty much the same. And we want to stay at that maintenance for at least 1 to 2 weeks. Why do we want this? We want to resensitize our body. We want to give our body a break because the goal of eating is to stay alive. You want to stay at this baseline here. If you're bulking up, you're now putting more stress on your body, taking in more food than what you need. If you're cutting down, you're giving it less resources to work with. The body thinks that it's starving. So while the goal is to, yes, get bigger or get leaner, it's smart just to have a 1 to 2 week phase where we just sit in the middle, chill out, breathe, let our body adjust, let the insulin sensitivity come back because it's kind of been blunted when we go bulk, and you're going to be super low on calories in your cut. Just give yourself a minute to rest. So you stay there for 1 to 2 weeks. The third step, however, is what differentiates the two processes, and that is to drop 300 to 500 calories. Now, this video isn't about cutting, but I just want to give you some context on what it looks like when you stop a bulk, go back into a maintenance, then jump into a cut. So we're not going to drop 100 or 200 calories because that deficit's not going to be strong enough for us to really get any crazy results. We're trying to lose body fat here. And so it's going to take a bit of a stronger deficit. Now, I don't recommend dropping 1,000 calories right off the bat because your maintenance might only be 2,200. And so if you drop 1,000 calories, you're right into a massive deficit. The goal of a cut, again, not a cutting video, but the goal of a cut is to lose fat and preserve all the muscle mass, ideally 100%. Now, this 100% preservation, probably not going to happen. You're going to lose a little bit of muscle in the process, but it's not going to be really noticeable. It only becomes noticeable when your deficit becomes so big, so large, that you now have zero resources, 0 calories to work with, and therefore your body resorts to burning muscle as a response. But if you have a small deficit like this, or like a medium-sized deficit, and then you progressively, as you continue your cut, you progressively drop calories either through less calories eaten from food or doing more cardio, then you just end up at a point where your body is melting fat away, but has enough resources to preserve that muscle mass. So I'll make a cutting video at some point in the future. That's not what this video is, but at least gives you some context on what to do to start a cut. But guys, that pretty much covers this video. All the questions that you need to ask yourself if you're unsure if you want to keep bulking up or if you want to stop and cut. And you're going to be in the best possible opportunity to build more muscle when you're in that calorie surplus. So we want to cut as the last base option. And I'm not saying to cut just because you feel like cutting or you feel like you should stop bulking. Answer all the questions that we talked about in this video one by one. And if you can conclude that it makes sense for you to keep bulking up. If you're getting to a point where you actually are legitimately getting too fat, it might be time to look at a cut, or if you just want to stop bulking altogether and you've reached the level of mass that you want to get to. But 9 times out of 10, and if you're watching this channel, the answer to that is no, you want to keep bulking. So guys, I've been George Tressiter, founder of The Incredible Bulk, and I make these videos because there's a lot of skinny guys out there and a lot of fitness is dedicated to weight loss. That's not what I do here. I make sure the guys who are skinny, who don't get a lot of attention, I was one of those guys. And so I know exactly how it feels to have pretty much none of the advice that you find online apply to you whatsoever. So I founded The Incredible Bulk after I transformed myself and many people like me to go from this to this. And so if you're willing to embark on this journey, it's a different kind of process for sure. It's not losing fat. It's not like a Weight Watchers 100-pound loss transformation. We are trying to create something from nothing. And so that takes effort. That takes more effort than a weight loss journey. I want to make sure that you guys are absolutely equipped to pull this off on your own. And if you don't want to do it alone and you want to work with me one-on-one so that I can make sure that you don't mess up, that's what this is for. And so guys, I've been George Tressiter. I got nothing else left to say. So we'll talk soon.